This is Chapter 1 of When the Sun Darkens by Jason Breshears. Chapter 1 is entitled Existence of Planet Phoenix. The legend of the Phoenix is of particular antiquity. The old stories of the Phoenix held that it began as a great bird in the heavens that immersed into the sun with red plumage, but that it underwent a transformation into a flaming, leaping star. Zechariah Sitchin provides evidence that the ancients associated Phoenix to a great spherical object that appeared on the horizon, a mysterious celestial creature that appeared only every 500 or so years. The legend was universal. It has now been determined that every Native American culture, from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego, preserves stories concerning a gigantic bird so huge it darkened the sun. The concept of the phoenix seems to be a Greek preservation of Egyptian scientific records. A leading authority of Greek studies, Robert Graves, wrote that the phoenix is the masculine form of Phonissa, a title for the moon meaning the red or the bloody one. This fact is an astronomical relic preserved in the garb of fable, like the red and gold plumage of the phoenix. For as we will learn in this work, when planet Phoenix transits between the Earth and the Sun, it casts a dark red shadow over the moon. The link between Phoenix and Phoenicia is quite apparent. Chroniclers long ago, like Horapollo, used the terms Phoenix and Phoenician interchangeably for someone who returned from a long journey. The earliest stories of Phoenix are associated with the person and reign of Enoch, who was a prophet, an astronomer, a king, and then emperor. He was in fact the first to reign over an empire. And the title Phoenix is the Greek form of the Egyptian Pahanuk, or the House of Enoch. The historian Frederick Haberman notes that the Phoenician chronicler Sanchoniathon, writing about 1000 BC, recorded that Phoenix was once a man. The connection between this enigmatic phenomenon and this pre-flood chronologist will be made more apparent later in this book. It is sufficient to understand at this point that the appearance of Phoenix to our predecessors had everything to do with a change of kingship instigated by the darkening of the solar orb by some vast object. Long ago, the authority of a king was made known by his seal. A tablet bearing an official message from the throne was stamped with the seal of the king. Ancient seals were adorned with images relative to the importance of their owners. Scholars of Near East studies have noted that at various points in history among the Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian dynasties, the kings of Mesopotamia employed the royal seal of the winged disc. Sitchin, in his fervor to provide evidence of the Anunnaki planet of Nibiru, assumes that throughout his works that depictions of this winged disc concern this Anunnaki planet. In many early depictions of our solar system found among Mesopotamian ruins, the winged planet is prominently displayed as a member of this system. And we are not to confuse planet Phoenix with the real and extremely distant planet Nibiru, brought to the world's attention by Sitchin. Planet Phoenix had its own special representations, always depicted with wings. It was the artistic Mesopotamian reliefs and seals that gave rise to the belief by later generations that Phoenix was an immense celestial bird, so colossal that when it immersed into the sun, the solar orb would go dark. The phoenix bird was thought to resurrect because after a protracted period of time, the whole sun darkening episode would reoccur. The artist depicted Phoenix with wings because this was a way to convey that unlike the other planets of this solar system, planet Phoenix flew a different course than those common wanderers of the ecliptic plane. Before we continue, it is important that the reader not make the mistake of assuming that this book is about Nibiru, masked by another name. The Nibiru that Sitchin writes about is a gigantic planet, the origin of the Anunnaki, with an orbital chronology very different than planet Phoenix. Sitchin does not give us a definitive timeline for this alien planet, but for those interested in reviewing it, see my other work entitled Anunnaki Homeworld, Orbital History, and 2046 AD Return of Planet Nibiru. The erudite and meticulous historian Pliny the Elder truly believed that one can know a lot about something and still not quite understand it. His epic work, called Natural History, is today internationally esteemed. His source materials, including 147 Roman writers and 327 foreign authors. He was known to write down excerpts from all the books he studied, and his personal philosophy was that every book had something that he could benefit from. His penetrating research led him to conclude that throughout the span of human history, there transpired ominous and long drawn out eclipses of the sun, and that their cause was hidden by the rarity of their occurrence, and for this reason they are not understood. Pliny added that these strange darkenings of the sun were quite natural, and that they transpired at fixed times. Today's historians and scientific antiquarians gloss over these references, claiming that Pliny merely discoursed about regular eclipses, the transit of the moon between Earth and Sun. But Pliny does not mention that the moon is what darkens the sun, a significant fact that such a penetrating researcher would not have omitted. In his work, he dedicates time to eclipses and the moon, but sets apart these other darkenings as the effect of something different. As it will be demonstrated herein, eclipses by the moon have nothing to do with what the ancients recorded. Interestingly, Pliny foreknew that his findings would be disbelieved, basing his observations on the predictability of human behavior. He wrote that the majestic things of nature lack credibility because men see things piecemeal, refusing to put the entire picture together using the pieces available to them. Though Pliny could foresee the future disbelief of critics, he could not have foreseen that his own death would be connected in the most astonishing way to these long drawn-out eclipses he wrote about. In 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius erupted violently and buried the Roman luxury cities of Herculaneum and Pompeii under several feet of ash and pumice. During the chaos, Pliny received notice that a female friend was in distress and required his assistance. He drew near to the volcano in his rescue attempt, and probably from an acute, inquisitive mind. Sadly, he was never seen again. The Roman historian died in the area of Herculaneum and Pompeii by the wrath of Vesuvius, never suspecting that directly below these Roman cities were the entombed remains of an even more ancient civilization, cities that had themselves been buried alive by Vesuvius in 1689 BC, the exact year planet Phoenix transited, darkening the sun and initiating global quakes and volcanism, as we will discover. For his time, Pliny represented the epitome of human knowledge of the world and the universe. Like Aristotle before him, he believed that all learning proceeds entirely or partially by things that are previously known. But there was a man even before Pliny who, in all the ways that make a sage, was a man before his time. His name was Lucretius, and his work is preserved in the 7,400-line poem entitled On the Nature of the Universe. Lucretius died in 54 BC, over half a century before Pliny was born. The year of his death in 54 BC was also noted for a peculiar rain of spongy iron that afflicted Lucania. Lucretius adhered to the philosophy that the unseen things of this world could be discovered by studying what was seen. He is famous today for his theory that the entire universe is composed of infinitely tiny atoms, a fact now, of course, proven. Lucretius was troubled by the assertions of some that the world was very old, because the whole sum of Greek knowledge of the past merely spanned back to the Theban and Trojan Wars, which were 1244 and 1229 BC. He further wrote that the history of the world was one of earthquakes that caused entire cities with their civilizations and citizens to sink to the bottom of the seas, and that the great flood that destroyed whole races of men was only one cataclysm in the cycle of quakes. Lucretius's most incredible statement is that some unknown body, not the moon, passes over the surface of the sun and darkens the earth at a fixed time. Lucretius's writings are more specific than Pliny's, the former detailing the effect and the latter explaining the cause of the sun darkenings, that something passes over the surface of the sun. Lucretius wrote that an object passed between Earth and the sun when Pliny mentions that there were long drawn-out eclipses. While Pliny only infers that this phenomenon was not caused by the moon, Lucretius is more direct. Scholars today vehemently assert that references like these always refer to our moon. Their position is untenable. This explanation is held, however, because of the obvious fact that it is known in the solar system that only two planets transit between the Sun and Earth, these being Mercury and Venus. Both of these, through a telescope, are viewed against the backdrop of the glowing sun as tiny dots passing over the surface of the fiery sphere. But this assertion presupposes that the object darkening the sun travels along the ecliptic with the other known planets. As the pseudo-mythical evidence has already revealed, Planet Phoenix is flying a different path off of the ecliptic plane and travels far away from the inner solar system. The hypocrisy of the modern scientific world is abundantly evident in their prejudice against the statements of these men, Lucretius and Pliny. While these philosopher historians are accredited today with the discovery of so many modern concepts and ideas, they are also accused of not comprehending the simple mechanics of an eclipse caused by the moon. This hypocrisy is amplified by the curious fact that it is largely held by the establishment that the phenomenon of eclipses was actually discovered over 500 years before Lucretius or Pliny were even born. Thales of Miletus was accredited with this, and his story is another strange coincidence in the history of Planet Phoenix. The renowned father of history, Herodotus Halicarnassus, in his Histories, wrote that Thales of Miletus was a Phoenician by remote descent. He is named among the 7 wise men of Greece. Thales was the first among the Greeks to travel to Egypt and receive specific instruction. Hieronymus of Rhodes said that Thales was an independent researcher, having never had a teacher until he studied in Egypt and associated with the priestly colleges. Thales lived from 640 to 546 BC. On his return from Egypt, he founded the Ionian school of astronomy and philosophy. He is thought to be the originator of algebra, and he taught that the stars were solids, as well as the sun and moon as we know. Thales knew that the moon's light was borrowed from the sun by reflection, comprehending that the moon disappeared when the earth cut off the sun's light, or through a lunar eclipse. He was further aware of the sphericity of the earth. There can be no doubt that Thales was an initiate to a secret corpus of astronomical information concerning Planet Phoenix. He knew more than Lucretius or Pliny, for Thales was in possession of the knowledge of this mysterious planet's actual orbital history. In the 4th year of the 48th Olympiad, Thales predicted that the sun would darken for a period of time after the passage of 2 years. His prediction was made in 585 BC. He knew this would transpire in what translates into our modern calendar as 583 BC. In the reign of Alyattes, king of Lydia, but he merely foretold the year, not the day. This fact alone proves that Thales predicted something unusual, not an eclipse. Again, that is glossed over by the thinkers of our time, but what cannot be ignored is what occurred in 583 BC, in accord with a specifically fixed time.